Hey, so I wanted to make this video. I kind of recorded this already, but I forgot part of what I wanted to say, so I'm re-recording it. Um, Climate change. There's a lot of things that people forget about climate change, or don't even bring up in climate change discussions. Firstly, the climate has always been changing. It's been changing since Earth was a planet. It is probably never going to stop changing until entropy finally, destroys the planet. Um, uh, Earth was originally a molten ball of rock, and it cooled down, and it's actually been covered in ice multiple times. It's also been covered in water a couple of times. The period that we call the Ice Age was just the most recent time that Earth was covered in ice. The Carboniferous period actually had higher temperatures than we have now. The Carboniferous period also had larger plants and more numerous plants. Another thing, Earth is a closed system, which means, well, it's not an entirely closed system. We're constantly leaking hydrogen off into space. Hydrogen is the most lightweight element that we know of. So it's constantly leaking off out of our atmosphere into space, and we do occasionally take in other elements, usually rocky elements from meteorites. There is as a closed system, things do tend to balance out here. If the levels of CO2 are raised and we have enough plants on the Earth, they will actually feed off the CO2. There is a rare phenomenon that indicates that if there is too much CO2, plants will actually suffocate. However, that's not entirely accurate, and it's a very rare instance. And actually, I do believe we do have enough plants on the planet. In fact, most of the carbon filtration on Earth takes place in the oceans. It's phytoplankton and oceanic vegetation that converts the CO2 into oxygen. So land plants actually play a very, very small role in that. Another thing, CO2 is not the biggest greenhouse gas. CO2 is the biggest man-made greenhouse gas. The biggest greenhouse gas is actually water vapor. Believe it or not, water vapor reflects and refracts sunlight more than any other gas on the planet, and there's more of it. It's responsible for around 99% of all atmospheric climate change phenomena. Another thing, in the past, the climate was actually much more radical. There are graphs which have been made by studying geology. You can actually tell what the climate was by studying geology, by the way, because you can find various crystalline structures and sedimentary layers, which indicate different forms of climate events and whatnot. And about a million years before humans were even a thing is the last radical change that we've had. I mean, aside from the Ice Age and the Younger Dryas flood, which was basically a global flood about 12,000 years ago. But even then, the climate was not radically changed. It was simply slightly different. It was just enough of a difference to, freeze the Earth and flood the Earth. And we've actually been very moderate since then. There was an experiment that was that actually there is an experiment that you can do yourself. You just take a glass of water, put some ice cubes in it, and measure the volume. The volume doesn't change at all. The density of the water changes, yes, as the ice cubes melt. The liquid water increases in number of atoms, I guess, and the ice, the frozen water, decreases in number of atoms, but the volume stays the same. The density of the ice changes, and the volume stays the same. So if the ice caps were to melt, that wouldn't really change the overall height of water on the planet, at least not by much. And in fact, over the past 100 years or so, there hasn't been a single marked increase of water rise. Now, the last thing that I really wanted to say is that climate change alarmism has over 40 years of failed predictions, and science is generally qualified by the quality of the predictions which a scientific theory can provide. Climatology has provided multiple failed predictions over the past 40 years. In the 70s, they told us we would all be freezing in 10 years. The world would be another ice ball in 10 years. In the 80s, we were told we had 15 years before the Earth would flood due to global warming. In the 90s, we were told we had 15 years before the Earth would flood due to global warming. In the 2000s, we were told we had 15 years before the Earth would flood due to global warming. We've been told the same thing for 40 years now, and it never comes true. It's just bullshit. That's about all I wanted to say. Thanks for watching. Peace.